What would you do if you saw an innocent employee with Down syndrome being cruelly mistreated? What if I told you that Hollywood superstar Keanu Reeves was silently watching this very situation unfold, only to step in and do something truly unbelievable? Ethan stood at the entrance of the bustling local market, his uniform freshly ironed and a name tag gleaming on his chest. His heart raced with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. It was his first day on the job. The warm morning sun filtered through the glass doors as he took a deep breath, determined to make his family proud. James, the market manager, greeted him with a reassuring smile. "Welcome to the team, Ethan. We're glad to have you here." Ethan's face lit up as he shook James's hand. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best," he said earnestly. Inside, the market buzzed with life carts rolling over the polished floor, cash registers beeping, and customers chatting. Ethan listened intently as James showed him how to organize products and bag groceries. He nodded at every instruction, repeating each step in his mind to remember. His enthusiasm was infectious, though a few co-workers exchanged glances and whispered, "He's a bit slow, isn't he?" Ethan heard them but pretended not to. He focused on proving that he belonged there. By the end of his shift, fatigue weighed on him, but pride shone in his eyes. He had made it through his first day. The line at the checkout stretched longer as the afternoon rush set in. Ethan's movements remained careful and precise, double-checking each item to avoid mistakes. As he scanned the last of a customer's groceries, he sighed in relief, thinking his shift was nearly over. But amidst the ordinary crowd, a pair of narrowed eyes watched him with growing impatience. Ethan, oblivious to the brewing storm, kept working. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the energy in the market subtly shifted. Susan, a sharply dressed woman with heels that clicked authoritatively on the tiled floor, stormed in. Her expression already brimming with disapproval, she scanned the aisles and muttered, "These stores never know how to organize things." Her voice, though not directed at anyone in particular, was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Customers glanced her way, some exchanging uneasy glances while others quickly looked away. Susan's shopping was a whirlwind, items thrown haphazardly into her cart, elbows nudging aside anyone who dared slow her down. Children in her path received cold glares, and anyone comparing prices was met with a dismissive scoff. With her cart brimming, she marched toward the checkout, her gaze locked onto Ethan's line. Though not the shortest, she joined it, tapping her foot impatiently as she watched him bag groceries for the customer ahead. "Is this for real?" she mumbled under her breath, rolling her eyes. "How can someone this slow be working here?" A few customers overheard but said nothing. The air thickened with discomfort. When it was finally her turn, Susan slammed her items onto the conveyor belt, shoving them forward. Ethan, maintaining his composure, greeted her with a soft smile. "Good morning, ma'am," he said. Her response was a glare paired with a sarcastic, "I hope it is good because I don't have all day." Ethan's hand, steady a moment ago, began to tremble. He scanned her items, trying to keep pace, but every beep of the register seemed to echo her impatience. Her eyes bored into him as she sighed audibly, fingers drumming an impatient rhythm on the counter. "Is this going to take long?" she snapped, leaning forward. "Honestly, it feels like I'm watching this in slow motion." His cheeks flushed a deep red. Ethan's breath quickened as he fumbled with a carton of eggs. It slipped from his hand, falling to the floor with a soft thud. His heart sank. He crouched to retrieve it, murmuring, "I'm so sorry," but Susan wasn't done. "Oh my God," she said loudly, turning to the hire. "He can't even hold a bag. This is pathetic." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, but no one intervened. Ethan's vision blurred with unshed tears, his mind spiraling back to dark memories, his stepfather's voice echoing, "You'll never amount to anything, boy. Don't even try." He swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep bagging, but Susan, now emboldened by the silence around her, crossed her arms and leaned closer. "Someone needs to do something about this," she barked. "I don't have all day to deal with incompetence." The tension in the air was palpable. Customers glanced at one another, some pulling out their phones to record the unfolding scene. Ethan's breathing turned shallow, his hands trembling uncontrollably. His shoulders hunched as he tried to make himself smaller, wishing he could vanish. Susan, not noticing or perhaps not caring, took another step forward. Her finger jabbed toward him. "This is ridiculous," she declared. "You shouldn't be working here if you can't handle something as simple as bagging groceries." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, each word from Susan a blow to his fragile confidence. His mind raced for something, anything to say. But the words stuck in his throat, tangled in fear and shame. A small bag of flour slipped from his grasp, landing with a soft plop. Susan threw her hands up. "Look at that. This is what we're dealing with." Laughter, sharp and cruel, escaped her lips. The checkout line buzzed with tension as Ethan's hands shook under the pressure. His breathing grew uneven, each inhale feeling like it dragged shards of glass through his chest. Susan's sharp words echoed louder than the beeping scanner. "This is unacceptable. You shouldn't be working here if you can't handle something as simple as bagging groceries." Her voice sliced through the market like a blade, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Ethan's face paled, his fingers fumbling with a loaf of bread that slipped from his grasp, landing on the floor with a soft thump that sounded deafening in the heavy silence. Susan's gaze swept over the gathering crowd, searching for validation. "Do you all see this?" she demanded, throwing her arms up. "We're all being held up because of him." Her voice, dripping with disdain, reverberated through the store. "This is the fast lane, and he is anything but fast." Customers glanced around awkwardly, some with sympathy, others too uncomfortable to meet Ethan's eyes. A few silently agreed, their shifting feet and exasperated sighs adding to the weight pressing down on him. Ethan's vision blurred with tears he fought desperately to hold back. His mind raced, flashing to painful memories sitting at the kitchen table as a child, his former stepfather's voice booming in his ears, "You'll never get anything right, boy. You're useless dead weight." That voice, one he thought he had long silenced, clawed its way back. His chest tightened, his shoulders curled inward, as if trying to shrink away from the present moment. "I just want to help," he whispered to himself, voice barely audible over the suffocating atmosphere. Susan, sensing his vulnerability, stepped closer, so close he could feel the anger radiating off her. Her finger jabbed at him like a weapon. "Someone needs to teach you how to do a real job," she snapped. "You're holding everyone up." The words echoed beyond the checkout lane, drawing attention from other aisles. Conversations halted, and the metallic clatter of carts rolling across tile floors ceased. An oppressive silence blanketed the market, broken only by the occasional shuffle of feet or the click of a recording phone camera. An older woman at the back of the line leaned toward her husband, voice hushed but strained with concern. "Isn't someone going to do something?" she whispered. "That poor boy looks so lost." Her husband shifted uneasily. I don't know," he stammered. "We don't want to cause trouble, do we?" Around them, the crowd's discomfort swelled, yet no one moved. Susan, oblivious to or perhaps fueled by the growing tension, turned back to Ethan, her voice now a full-throated roar. "If you can't do this job," she said, each word landing like a slap, "then leave. Someone needs to tell you the truth." Her words, venomous and relentless, hammered at Ethan's spirit. His hands, slick with sweat, struggled to grasp a carton of eggs. Another slip. Another humiliating thud. Susan's laugh, short, cruel, echoing, cut through the air like shattered glass. "He can't even hold a bag," she scoffed. "This is pathetic." A younger man midline hesitated before pulling out his phone to record. "This is awful," he muttered to the woman beside him. "But who's going to stop her?" The woman shook her head, fear flickering in her eyes. "She's so aggressive, I don't want to get involved." Meanwhile, Ethan's world contracted to the small space between the counter and his trembling hands. Each breath felt thinner than the last, as if the air itself had turned to lead. His gaze stayed fixed downward, refusing to meet Susan's scalding eyes. He wanted to speak, to do something, but the words clogged in his throat, trapped behind walls built by years of cruel remarks and self-doubt. His entire body quivered, caught in a storm of humiliation and helplessness. Across the store, James, the manager, finally sensed something amiss. His eyes darted toward the commotion. Brows furrowed, he started toward the checkout lane, weaving between shelves. But just as he quickened his pace, a customer stopped him with a question about a return policy. Torn between his duties, he glanced apologetically toward Ethan's line, the urgency gnawing at him, but he was too far away. Back in the checkout lane, the tension reached a suffocating peak. Susan crossed her arms, surveying the crowd as if expecting applause for her tirade. "This is what we're paying for," she sneered, projecting her voice to the bystanders. "This kind of service, he's way too slow. Unacceptable." Her final word bounced off the walls, amplifying the shame that hung in the air. Ethan clenched his jaw, willing himself to finish. Just get through this. Just bag the groceries, he thought, fighting against the tremors in his hands. But the humiliation clawed at him, relentless. He could hear the murmurs, the whispered judgments, the awkward justifications for inaction. Why is no one stopping her? Poor kid, but it's not my place. Someone else should say something. A young woman adjusted her purse, taking a tentative step forward but stopped short. Courage battled hesitation across her face, but fear won out. Ethan, desperate for a shred of kindness, found none. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed cruelly, casting stark shadows that seemed to swallow him whole. Susan, feeding off the crowd's silence, leaned forward for one final blow. "You're wasting everyone's time," she spat. "Time will never get back because of you." Her words detonated in the air, harsh and merciless. And then just when it seemed the weight of humiliation would crush Ethan completely, the atmosphere shifted. Thump, thump, thump. Footsteps deliberate, steady, echoing louder than the chaos. Conversations halted mid-whisper. Phones lowered. Even Susan's eyes flicked toward the source of the sound, her bravado momentarily faltering. The crowd parted as a figure emerged, a man dressed simply, yet carrying an undeniable presence. His gaze, calm but piercing, locked onto the unfolding scene. He walked toward the checkout with the kind of purpose that turned heads and silenced doubts. Customers exchanged glances. Recognition flickered across a few faces. "Is that no? It can't be." Ethan, blinking through the haze of shame, looked up, meeting the man's steady gaze. Warm, unyielding, protective. Susan opened her mouth, ready to snap. "This doesn't concern you," but the man's presence alone cut her words short. A hush swept over the market. The air felt thicker, charged with something electric and inevitable. Something was about to change. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. Susan stood in the checkout line, her arms crossed tightly over her chest as her glare bore into Ethan. Her voice, sharp and laced with disdain, cut through the market like a blade. "Do you all see this?" she barked, gesturing toward Ethan with exaggerated frustration. "We're all being delayed because of him. This is supposed to be the fast lane." Her words echoed off the walls, filling the air with tension so thick it seemed to weigh everyone down. Murmurs rippled through the line. Some customers shifted uncomfortably, while others glanced down at their phones, hoping to avoid being dragged into the confrontation. Yet no one stepped forward. Each passing second stretched into what felt like an eternity, the oppressive silence broken only by the occasional beep of the scanner and Susan's relentless tirade. To the side of the aisle, partially hidden behind a display of cereal boxes, a man stood quietly. His simple clothes helped him blend in with the crowd, but his posture, relaxed yet alert, hinted at something different. Arms crossed, he tilted his head slightly, eyes locked on the unfolding scene. There was no surprise in his expression, just calm contemplation, as if he had witnessed similar injustices before. His gaze, unwavering, followed every word Susan hurled and every flinch Ethan made. Ethan, hands trembling, focused on scanning items despite the burning heat crawling up his neck. His breathing grew shallower with each jab from Susan. "Just get through it. Just finish the shift," he told himself, but the weight of her words was crushing. His mind swirled with memories of his stepfather's cruel voice echoing similar insults. "You'll never amount to anything, boy. You're useless." The past and present blurred together, and Ethan felt small, trapped beneath the gaze of dozens of eyes. Susan, sensing the silence of the crowd as encouragement, pressed on. Her voice rose another octave, slicing through the store's ambient noise. "It's absurd that someone like this is working here," she shouted. "We all have things to do, places to be. Why should we be held hostage by his incompetence?" She gestured dramatically toward Ethan, like a prosecutor presenting damning evidence to a jury. Some customers exchanged uneasy glances, guilt creeping into their expressions. A woman at the back of the line whispered to her husband, "Isn't someone going to say something?" Her husband hesitated, eyes darting away. I don't know," he mumbled. "It's not our place," but the growing discomfort was palpable, like a storm cloud ready to burst. Susan's lips curled into a smirk. "That's what I thought," she sneered, interpreting the silence as validation. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the conveyor belt, his vision blurring as unshed tears threatened to fall. His hands fumbled, a carton slipping from his grasp and tumbling to the floor with a dull thud. Susan's laughter, cold and sharp, rang out. "Look at that. He can't even hold a bag. This is pathetic." The man by the aisle shifted his weight and took a deliberate step forward. The energy in the market shifted, a ripple of awareness swept through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. It was as if the entire room had been holding its breath, waiting for something or someone to intervene. Susan was too consumed by her own outrage to notice. "If you can't do this job," she hissed, voice dripping with venom, "the known, you're wasting everyone's time." Her words struck like hammer blows, each syllable designed to wound. Then, just as she drew in another breath to continue, the silence shattered. "That's enough." The words, calm yet firm, cut through the tension like a beam of light piercing a storm. All eyes snapped toward the source. The man from the aisle now stood fully visible, his presence commanding attention without effort. He didn't rush, he didn't need to. Each measured step carried the weight of quiet authority. Customers leaned in, whispers swirling. "Wait, is that? No way, is that him?" Phones emerged, screens lighting up as people began recording. Susan's brow furrowed in confusion and irritation. "And who do you think you are?" she demanded, folding her arms tighter. Her tone carried mockery, but there was an unmistakable tremor beneath it, something unsteady. The man stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm not here to tell you how to act," he said, voice calm yet resonant enough to reach every corner of the market. "But what you're doing right now is wrong." Susan blinked, caught off guard. "Wrong?" she echoed incredulously. "I'm just stating facts." He's holding everyone up. Her words, which moments ago had seemed so powerful, now sounded brittle against the calmness before her. The man's lips curved into a small, knowing smile, though the intensity in his eyes never wavered. "There's a difference between stating facts," he said, "and using them as a weapon to humiliate someone." A hush fell over the crowd. Customers who had remained passive now shifted, their gazes swinging from Susan to the man like spectators at a pivotal moment of play. Ethan, still frozen behind the counter, looked up, his eyes met the man's. For the first time that day, he felt something other than dread. Safety. Support. It was as if the man's gaze alone said, "You are not alone." The man took a step closer to Ethan, his expression softening. "What's your name?" he asked gently. Ethan swallowed hard. Ethan, he stammered. "Well, Ethan," the man said with a reassuring smile, "you're doing a great job. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He placed a steady hand on Ethan's shoulder, a simple gesture like a shield against the barrage of cruelty. "We all have tough days," he added, voice warm, "but those don't define us. You understand?" Ethan nodded, tears finally spilling over, but they weren't from shame anymore. They were from something else, relief, validation. Susan, now visibly flustered, let out a nervous laugh. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but..." The man turned back to her, and his gaze no longer soft hardened with quiet conviction. "I believe in respect," he said, each word measured. "It costs nothing to be kind. You seem to have forgotten that." Susan's defiance faltered. Her mouth opened to retort, but no words came. The weight of dozens of disapproving eyes bore down on her. A woman midline called out, "He's right. It's not fair to treat the young man like that." Another chimed in, "We're all waiting in line just like you. What makes you so special?" Murmurs of agreement swelled into a wave of support. Susan's gaze darted around, searching for the backing she no longer had. Faces that once avoided eye contact now stared at her with open reproach. The man glanced back at Ethan, giving his shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "Keep being you," he said quietly. "That's more than enough." Ethan smiled through his tears. In that moment, the crushing weight of humiliation lifted, replaced by something stronger: dignity, hope. Susan, realizing she was surrounded by disapproval, mumbled something under her breath and grabbed her bags in a huff. Her heels clicked across the floor as she stormed out, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her like a final curtain on her performance. But the applause wasn't for her. It was for Ethan, for kindness, for standing up. And as the man turned to leave, the market didn't just feel like a store anymore. It felt like a place where, for once, right had won. The energy inside the market had transformed completely. What began as a humiliating scene of oppression had shifted into a powerful display of unity. Customers, many still recording with their phones, now looked toward Ethan with admiration and warmth rather than discomfort or pity. The tension that once suffocated the room had lifted, replaced by a current of empathy that seemed to ripple through every aisle. As the applause slowly faded, Keanu turned back to Ethan, offering a sincere smile. "Keep being yourself," he said gently, his voice carrying through the crowd. "Because who you are is already more than enough." Ethan's throat tightened. Tears welled in his eyes, not from shame, but from something far more profound: belonging. As Keanu turned and calmly walked out of the market, the customers continued clapping, the sound echoing off the walls. Ethan looked up, scanning the line of people. Faces that moments ago held impatience now radiated kindness. For the first time in what felt like ages, he felt like he mattered. Susan's harsh footsteps clicked across the floor as she stormed toward the exit, her anger replaced by humiliation. The automatic doors shut behind her, leaving a vacuum of silence that lasted only a heartbeat. Then, hushed conversation swelled. She had no right to speak to him like that. An older woman murmured to her companion, shaking her head. "I never thought I'd witness something like this," a man added. "And to think Keanu Reeves was here." His voice carried awe, echoing the stunned amazement that blanketed the market. While customers buzzed with excitement and disbelief, Ethan stood still, his gaze fixed on his trembling hands. Just minutes ago, those hands had felt clumsy and useless. Now, they seemed to carry a new weight. How did this moment change so fast? He asked himself, blinking back tears. James, the market manager, finally pushed through the crowd, his face etched with worry. "Ethan," he said, placing a steady hand on the young man's shoulder. "Are you okay?" Concern laced his voice. Ethan paused, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I am." His voice, though quiet, carried a newfound strength. There was something different in him now, a spark that hadn't been there before. Keanu's words echoed in his mind. "Your worth isn't measured by how fast you bag groceries. Your worth is who you are." As the line began moving again, something remarkable happened. Each customer approached Ethan with kindness instead of complaints. "You're doing a fantastic job," a woman said, handing over her items with a warm smile. "Hey, son," an older man added gruffly but kindly, "you've got more courage than most people out there. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those small but genuine words acted like bricks, rebuilding Ethan's confidence piece by piece. The market, once just a place of transactions, felt transformed. People chatted like neighbors rather than strangers, exchanging smiles and words of encouragement. A young woman holding her phone approached James, her eyes still wide with amazement. "That was incredible," she breathed. "You should post this on social media. People need to know how amazing Ethan is." James smiled and nodded. "I agree. But right now, the most important thing is that he knows that." Ethan glanced around, taking in the kindness surrounding him. The shift was palpable. The market no longer felt like just a workplace. It felt like a community. The minutes earlier, he had been a target of ridicule. Now, he was a symbol of resilience. When his shift finally ended, Ethan walked to the locker room, his steps slow but steady. Sitting on a worn wooden bench, he held his uniform in his lap and stared at it. His mind replayed the events of the day, the fear, the shame, and then the turning point. He remembered the cruel words from Susan, which had echoed so painfully familiar to his stepfather's voice. But this time, they had been drowned out by something stronger: support, empathy, and kindness. He closed his eyes and remembered his mother's words that morning. "You're important to us, Ethan. Never forget that." At the time, it had felt like something a mother would just say. Now, he believed it. Outside, Keanu walked calmly toward his parked car. He didn't wave to the crowd, didn't soak in the admiration. He wasn't there for recognition. As he reached for the door handle, he paused, glancing back at the market one last time. A small, satisfied smile curved his lips. This wasn't about me, he thought. It was about him, about what happens when someone finally steps up. By the next morning, the moment had become more than just a personal experience. It had become a global conversation. The video of Keanu defending Ethan exploded online, spreading across social media platforms like wildfire. Hashtags like "Respect for Ethan" and "Kindness Matters" trended worldwide. Millions watched, shared, and commented, many reflecting on how easy it is to tear someone down and how powerful it is to lift them up instead. Ethan, who had once dreaded attention, now found himself at the heart of a movement he never expected. Messages flooded in, people from all over the world thanking him for his courage, for reminding them of the importance of empathy. A teacher from another state wrote, "I showed this video to my students. You're inspiring kids to stand up for kindness." Walking to work that morning, Ethan felt something shift inside. His shoulders didn't sag like they used to. His gaze didn't drop to the ground. The cruel words that had haunted him seemed to carry less weight, replaced by the echo of applause and Keanu's steady voice. "Who you are is already more than enough." Stepping through the market's doors, he was greeted with smiles and waves. "Morning, Ethan." Someone called from across the produce section. "You're a legend, kid," another said. He chuckled, warmth spreading through him. Approaching his register, he took a deep breath, glancing at the customers lined up. They weren't just strangers anymore. They were people who had seen him, really seen him. And for the first time in his life, Ethan knew something with absolute certainty. He would never feel invisible again. Life is often like a vast stage where each of us plays the lead in our own story, but there are moments when we forget that behind the shy smile lies a heart fighting countless fears. Ethan, a young man with Down syndrome, stepped into his first day of work with hope in his heart. only to be met with cruelty and harsh words. Can you imagine? When every ounce of effort you give is dismissed, when your hands tremble not just from nerves, but from the pain of being belittled. And then, in that suffocating moment when the sting of ridicule seemed unbearable, a voice broke through the tension. That's enough. It wasn't a family member nor a friend, but a stranger who refused to stand silent in the face of injustice. Keanu reminded us all that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to stand up when silence becomes cruelty. That moment didn't just save Ethan, it touched the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Because at some point, haven't we all felt small in this world, wishing someone would truly see us, understand us, and reach out when we felt lost? Today, Ethan found that beacon of light. But what about tomorrow? Is there someone out there waiting for someone like you to show up? We may never fully grasp how deeply a kind word or a compassionate gesture can save someone. But one thing is certain, kindness is never wasted. When you choose empathy over judgment, you plant seeds of hope in someone else's heart. And sometimes the most extraordinary miracles stem from the simplest acts: a knowing glance, a heartfelt word, or simply not turning away when someone needs you. Ethan walked away from that day with pride in his heart, not because he did everything perfectly, but because he realized he deserved respect and love just like anyone else. And you, what will you choose today? To stand silent, or to be the person this world so desperately needs? Because sometimes it takes just one person to speak up to change an entire story. And that person could be you.